Hey, I'm PH and welcome to Good Bible Knowledge with PhD. In this set of videos, I want to answer common questions about the Bible in a fun and creative way, and I hope these videos will be helpful for your own spiritual journey in Jesus. Let's get started. Who is Daniel? In 597 BC, Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, surrendered to the ruthless nation of Babylon in order to avoid the destruction of Jerusalem. He was thus taken captive along with hundreds of Israelites who were of noble birth. It was King Nebuchadnezzar's intent to force these young men and women to abandon their heritage, their culture, and their God, and become indoctrinated in the ways of Babylon. Daniel was among those who were taken into exile, along with three others, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The book of Daniel is a first-hand account of the 70-year exile of Israel, which was foretold by God through the prophet Jeremiah. Therefore the Lord Almighty says this, "Because you have not listened to my words, this whole country will become a desolate wasteland, and you will serve the king of Babylon for a total of 70 years." During this time, God instructed his people to build houses and settle down in Babylon, to plant gardens, find wives for your sons, and give your daughters in marriage. And after 70 years were over, he promised that he would bring them back to the promised land. In the following videos, we'll look at the life of Daniel and these three young men and how they continue to honor the Lord in a foreign land, even at the risk of their own lives. And not only would they survive, God would use these four young men to humble the mightiest nation in the world. The first thing that King Nebuchadnezzar did was to change their names. In the ancient Near East, a name was about identity, and Daniel and these three men had beautiful Hebrew names that their godly parents had given to each one of them. Daniel means God is my judge. Hananiah means God has been gracious. Mishael means who is like our God. And Azariah means God is my helper. But in a deliberate attempt to erase their godly heritage and identity, Daniel's name was changed to Belshazzar, which means may the goddess protect his life. Hananiah and Mishael became Shadrach and Meshach, meaning who is God. And Azariah became Abednego, which means he is a servant of Nabu. Nebuchadnezzar would come to find that you can change the name, but you won't change the man, as each of these young men continued to shine for God in a land filled with pagan idolatry and immorality. They were faithful in worship, in prayer, and even in the food that they ate. When Daniel and these three men were brought to the king's palace, an important part of their indoctrination involved a daily diet of royal food and drink. Because these items were directly connected to the idolatry of Babylon, Daniel resolved not to touch the king's food. This was distressing to the chief of the guard, as he said, "If you persist in this rebellion, the king will have my head." Daniel then made a proposal to the chief, saying, "Test us for 10 days with a diet of vegetables and water, and then compare us to those who dined with the king's food, and then deal with us according to what you see." At the end of the 10 days, Daniel and these three young men were stronger and healthier than all the others. Not only did they excel physically, but all four proved superior in all forms of learning and wisdom, Daniel particularly in the skill of interpreting visions and dreams. At the end of their training, these four men stood before Nebuchadnezzar himself, and the king declared that these Hebrew boys were 10 times better than all the wise men of the kingdom. And he appointed them high positions in the company of consultants to the king, and Daniel would spend the remainder of his life in Babylon, serving under 5 different kings: Nebuchadnezzar, Evil-Merodach, Belshazzar, Darius, and Cyrus. What can we learn from this simple introduction of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? These 4 young men were taken captive to live as the personal project of the king of Babylon. As foreigners in a foreign land, they were continually pressured to forsake their God and conform to the world around them. Yet because of their determination to honor God no matter what, God placed them in a position to be a testimony for the Lord in one of the greatest pagan nations of their time. In Hebrews 11, we're reminded that because of Jesus' death and resurrection, this world is not our home. In fact, we yearn for a better country, a heavenly home. As followers of Jesus, in many ways, we live as strangers and foreigners in our present world. And even in the darkest of times, God has a plan and calls us to shine like stars for Jesus. Thanks for listening to another episode of Good Bible Knowledge. We'll see you next time.